All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So Jonathan asks, is there a reason only some future tickers are available for use? The answer generally is just that futures are still in beta, and to kind of limit the scope of what we're testing, we limit it to just those 4 tickers. We do plan to expand the futures tickers. It'll probably happen in the next couple of months. But yeah, it hasn't quite happened yet. Hey, Sander. How's it going, man? Can you hear me okay? Just throw a 1 in the chat if you can hear me okay. Hey, Nick, Banu. Awesome to see you guys here. Awesome. Thanks, Sander. Thanks, Nick. And you guys can see my screen okay? Should see a dashboard with a paper account. Great. All right, I mentioned before you guys joined, if there's anything specific that you want me to cover or any questions you want to ask, feel free to just put those questions or things you want me to cover in the chat. So let's go ahead and get started. I think what I'm going to kind of do is just go through the TradersPost application today and just kind of use the application and connect some brokerage accounts, set up some webhooks, set up some strategies, and subscribe to those strategies and connect them to an account. And then we'll trigger some test signals to show what all the functionality looks like. So to start, what I'm going to do is I already have this paper account. Every new TradersPost account gets a blank $100,000 paper account. But to connect a third-party brokerage account, all you have to do is go to Brokers and then click Connect Broker at the top right. And that'll give you a list of all the brokers that TradersPost supports, and then you can click one of them to go through the process to authorize TradersPost to connect to your brokerage account. So I'm just going to connect a test paper TradeStation account of mine. So we'll go ahead and log in. And this is just a simulated account. It's only a simulated account, no live account. And you'll see by default, it chooses the first account that TradeStation returns to us. But if you want to change it to be associated to the margin account, you can just change the value in the dropdown and the choose paper account dropdown. So let's just change it to the margin one. So that'll be for stocks and options. So this is something that that comes up quite frequently with TradeStation. TradeStation only allows you to connect a TradeStation login to a system like TradersPost one time. So people run into this is that they go back to the brokers and they try to go to Connect Broker and choose TradeStation again. And they go through the login flow and they come back and they see that the other TradeStation account that they previously connected now has lost access. And that's because TradeStation only allows you to connect a login to a system like TradersPost one time. That's different from other brokers. Alpaca, TD Ameritrade, it lets you connect it as many times as you want. But the way that you work around this is that once you connect the TradeStation account once, you'll see this clone button. And what this basically does is it allows us to have multiple accounts within TradersPost all sharing the one authentication that we set up when we first connected TradeStation. So if you just click clone and then confirm, and now we get a second TradeStation account. And you'll see now that this one was connected to the futures account because it basically will connect it automatically to the account that hasn't been selected yet. So now we have 2 TradeStation accounts. We have TradeStation Futures and we have TradeStation Margin. So the margin is the one where we do stocks, ETFs, and options, and TradeStation Futures is where you do futures. And Jonathan Stevenson asked earlier why we don't support other tickers for futures. You'll see that BTC, those are Bitcoin futures. We do have some development in progress to start to reintroduce more future symbols. That's why you see these 2 orders for Bitcoin futures there. So one of the interesting things about TradersPost is that we're basically a broker abstraction system, and you can connect multiple different brokerage accounts, and you get this unified user interface for managing everything related to that brokerage account. So right now I'm in this paper account, and I can manually trade within that brokerage account. And this TradersPost paper account, even though the market's closed, the TradersPost paper account lets you submit orders even when the market's closed. It's not as real of a simulated account as other paper brokers, but it's useful to be able to submit orders and have them be filled when the market is closed, when you're testing strategies and you want to play with your strategy and wire it all up at night, make sure it all works, and then you can switch it over to a live account for when the market opens. So one of the interesting things too is that these paper brokers by default have highly delayed data. And what you can do is if you click edit broker and get back to the edit screen for that paper account, you can actually choose one of the brokers that you connected previously as the market data source for that paper account. So I'm just going to connect it to the TradeStation margin account. And if we go to the details now, you'll see that this paper account now supports stocks, options, and futures. So let me actually go back and let's just undo this and go back to details. And you see now that by default, without a data source, the TradersPost paper accounts don't support options because natively within TradersPost, we don't have options data yet. All we have is delayed stocks data and delayed futures data. So by connecting it to the TradersPost paper account to your own brokerage account, you can basically pay for live data from TradeStation. And now we have stocks, options, and futures data for these paper accounts. And now you'll notice that the data is updating in real time as opposed to before, it was highly delayed data. And we also have access to futures now. So previously, if you were to search for any of the future symbols, you would not see them in the search. So the cool thing too is like now that we support stocks, options, and futures within the paper account, we can actually place orders, and you can actually have positions for stocks, futures, and now let's go open an options position. So let's just do a quick buy of this call. We'll do a market. So now we have 3 positions open in this paper account. We have a stock position, a futures position, and an options position. Now, this price isn't going to change because the market is closed, so the options prices aren't going to move. The square price will change because equities have after hours, and the after hours, extended hours are still open right now. All right, so I'm going to close all these positions now. And what I'm going to do now is to show if, say you want to reset the balance for your paper account, you can click Edit Broker, and then there's a reset button here. And this reset button will allow you to basically reset the state of the paper broker back to like it was when it was first created. So say you only want the paper broker to be $10,000, you could change the value to 10,000. And now we go back to this paper broker, it is empty and it's a $10,000 account. So let's go back to reset and let's make it a $100,000 paper broker. All right, now it's back to 100,000. So you notice I was placing orders manually. Now I can go over to my TradeStation futures account here, and I can also place orders in the actual TradeStation account, and the user interface for managing those positions excuse me, and creating orders is exactly the same no matter which brokerage account you're using. So you get this nice, clean, unified user interface to manage your positions across multiple brokerage accounts, and the user interface is all consistent and unified. So we'll just open a quick NQ position, and you'll see now we have this position open. We have the order history here, and I can click close all, and it'll close that position. All right, and same thing with the TradeStation margin account. I can, right now I won't be able to place any trades, but like just to show what it looks like, let's find Square, and let's just do a buy. And this is going to get rejected because TradeStation actually respects, TradeStation paper accounts actually respect the market hours. So that's why we get a failed or order rejection. And you'll see the order there also shows that it's rejected. The order ID right there is clickable. The view order button and this link go to the same place. So if you click view order, this takes you to the screen to look at the information for the order. We try to place a debug button on every screen. It's useful for the TradersPost staff, but it also could be useful to you to kind of see what the underlying data looks like. So this is the data for the order that came back from TradeStation, and this is the same order. It's just that data is mapped to the TradersPost order model. So you can see the reject reason right here and the reject reason mapped into the TradersPost order model. All right, so I think that's it for the TradersPost unified broker UI. Any questions about that? If not, we'll go ahead and move on. All right, we'll move forward. 1 second, let me check my notes. All right, cool. So we're going to go ahead and just start with creating some strategies within TradersPost and get them connected to our paper brokers. So everything within TradersPost is based around this concept of a webhook. And a webhook is a way for applications to communicate information between each other. So if you are familiar with custom coding or using TradingView or TrendSpider, they all have the ability to send data to a webhook. And in TradingView, you can set up a strategy. You can say, I want to create an alert that sends when XYZ is true. And when that alert triggers, I want to send that alert to this webhook URL. So the first thing you have to do is create a webhook. So we'll just create a stocks webhook. And we'll allow the Square ticker. If you don't want to restrict it to any ticker, you can check allow any ticker. I personally prefer to restrict it to the specific tickers that I want to trade. It does require more updating. So if I wanted to set up a new alert for Tesla, I would have to go in and edit my webhook and allow Tesla here. Otherwise, it would not allow any requests to be sent to that webhook. So you can also limit the webhook so that only TradingView or TrendSpider or specific IP addresses have the ability to send signals to that webhook. So let's go ahead and save that webhook. And let me show you, actually, I'll come back to that later. I'll show you something in a second. So the next thing, once you have the webhook created, is you need to create a strategy. And let's just call this the stock strategy. And let's associate it to that stocks webhook that we created previously. And some of this other information we're just going to leave blank, but say it was a published public strategy on TradersPost, you could show the URL to that strategy on TradingView, who the author is, the URL to that author's profile on TradingView, and what the recommended account size is. For example, if it's a strategy that could potentially trigger multiple signals within one trading day, you're going to want at least $25,000, probably more like $30,000, so that you have a little bit of buffer. If you don't have a $25,000 account, you could be at risk of triggering the pattern day trading rule and then getting your account restricted so that you can only sell and you can no longer buy. And I think some brokers are different, but most of them will put your account on a 90-day sell only restriction. So then these settings here, subscription defaults, these are the default settings for the strategy that get used whenever someone subscribes to the strategy. So we're just going to put some sane defaults in here so that when we create a subscription to this strategy and connect it to our broker, it'll default these settings. So we want to take both sides, both bullish and bearish. So we're going to choose both. We're going to default the tickers to square. We want it to buy stocks. We'll show how to set up options and future strategies later. But this strategy is a stock strategy, so choose stocks in the asset class. And all these values can be left blank. Those are only for if you choose the options asset class. And then in the position size, let's default this to 10% of our portfolio value. And I'll show you what that looks like once we subscribe to the strategy. And let's do entry market and exit market. All right, now that this strategy is created, the next thing that you're going to want to do is create a subscription to that strategy and connect the strategy to a broker that you've connected to TradersPost. So just go ahead and click create subscription. And this is a stock strategy. So let's connect it to the TradersPost paper broker. Click confirm. So you'll see now that we have this subscription created and it's populated with the defaults that we created or that we set in the strategy subscription defaults. So you see sides is both. It defaulted to square. It selected the broker that we selected on the previous screen. It chose stocks as the asset class, and it's doing 10% of the portfolio value, and it is doing an entry market and exit market. All right, so let's save that strategy subscription. And you see here that at the top right, this is basically like a preview of what the configuration would produce if you were to get a signal to that strategy. So if we got a signal for Square right now at the current market price, it would buy 97 shares. The market price is $102.52. So basically, because this is a $100,000 paper broker and we configured 10% of the portfolio value, that means that we're allowed to spend $10,000 per position. And given that the price is $102.52, that means that we can buy 97 shares, which totals almost $10,000. All right, so we have this subscription all set up now. The last thing that I'll show you here is you can click the bullish example or the bearish example. Because we have sides both chosen, that's why this bearish example shows up. So you can see if we were to get a bearish signal, and if it's stocks, if we were to get a sell signal, the entry order is going to be a sell short. And if we were to get a buy signal, which is a bullish signal, we're going to exit the short position, which is going to be a buy to cover order. All right, so now let's enable this strategy subscription. All right, now it's enabled. And now let's trigger a test signal to that webhook so that we can see what it looks like. So if you go to strategies, click webhooks, click view, and then click send request at the top right, this will basically allow us to manually send a signal to that webhook. And this is useful because strategies may only trigger one signal a day or maybe 2 or 3 signals a day. And you don't want to have to sit around all day waiting for your strategy to actually trigger a signal to make sure that everything is configured correctly. So just go ahead and click send request, and let's send a buy order, but let's actually change it to a ticker that we don't support. So we'll click send, and you see how it says ticker is not allowed on this webhook. That's because in the webhook configuration, we're only allowing the square ticker. So another thing that's really useful is the logs button right here. This basically shows you a raw list of all of the requests, both successful ones and failed requests that get sent to that webhook. So this is the webhook request that we just triggered via the send request button, and you can see that it failed. So now let's send a request to the webhook, but let's send one that it will accept. So we're going to do a buy for square. So let's go ahead and uncheck the test button. And the reason why we're going to uncheck test is because we actually want this webhook to trigger all of the strategies and the strategy subscriptions that are associated to that webhook. So let's go ahead and click send. And you'll see that we got a trade triggered, but it's queued. And the reason why that is because the market's closed. So when the market is closed, it'll basically queue that trade to be sent to the broker at the next market open. So what we can do though is, because it's extended hours right now, what we could do is let's unqueue this trade. This basically removes it from the queue so that it won't be sent to the broker at the next market open. So tomorrow morning at 8:30 when the market opens, it'll dequeue that trade and immediately send it to the broker. But we're going to unqueue it. So now this trade is in a new status, and you basically have to approve or reject the trade at this point. But what we're going to do is we're going to edit the trade. And what this does is you can edit the settings for just this trade. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this to allow entry extended hours. And let's see, we're going to do bullish only. So now that we've unchecked entry market and exit market, and we checked allow entry extended hours, when we save this, this is going to submit a limit order instead of a market order. And it will be good until canceled plus extended hours. So now that we've done that, we can actually go back and approve this trade, and it'll send it to the broker because it's allowing extended hours and after hours is still active right now. So let's go ahead and click approve. And you see that the order was filled, it was sent to the broker, and now we have entered a bullish position on Square. This section right here called broker logs is basically all of the API calls that we made to the broker when executing that trade. So in this example, we were only entering a new position. So there's only one API call here to basically create an order. So if we click that, you'll see that this is the data that it sent to the broker to buy 97 shares. It was a limit order. It was a buy order. And the limit price was 102,455. And then the response is the response from the broker. And you see that the response was status filled. We can see what the price was filled at. So that's just useful for kind of like debugging the information and what was sent to the broker. All right, so let's go back to the trade here. And what we're going to do is now I'm going to edit the subscription, the strategy subscription. And I'm going to change the settings now to be bullish only. I'm going to disable auto submit. And I'm going to uncheck entry market, uncheck exit market, and allow entry extended hours and allow exit extended hours. So now you see even the exit order is also good until canceled plus extended hours. If you expand the order row, you can see extended hours is yes. Same thing for the entry, extended hours is set to yes. So now let's go back to the webhook and let's send a request. And let's send a sell signal. So we have an open long position. So we're going to sell that long position. And because I disabled auto submit, when we click that trade, you'll see that it hasn't been submitted to the broker yet. Because again, you can click the edit subscription button to go back to the subscription configuration. Auto submit was disabled. So we'll go back to that pending trade and we'll click approve. Actually, before I do that, just to review this. So this is an exit order and we're selling to close basically that long position. We'll click approve. And now that position has been exited. All right. So the other thing that I haven't showed is this little red icon up here. This is basically like your trade inbox. Every time you get a new trade, it'll show up here. You can click to view the trade. You can click mark read. All right, so we're done with all these trades. If you want to click this button up at the top, that'll mark all of the trades as read. All right, so a few other things that I'll show you. If you go to the broker UI, there's a trades button at the top right. This basically shows you all the trades that are associated to that broker. You can also go to the subscriptions and click the trades button. That'll show you all of the trades that are associated to that strategy subscription. Let's send one more webhook, except let's turn on auto submit again. Let's go back to the webhook and we'll send a request. And the trade is complete. It was auto submitted to the broker. And now if we go back to that paper broker, you'll see that we have an open position now for Square. All right, so let's see. All right, so let's just close that position now. And we'll do it with an exit. So the difference between a sell signal and an exit is that if you are taking both sides and you send a sell signal, it will exit the long position and then it'll wait for that long position to exit and then it'll enter short. And then similarly, the buy signal will do the reverse. If you have an open short position and you receive a buy signal, it'll exit the short position. It'll wait for that short position to be fully exited and that order to be filled. And then it'll send another order to enter long on the other side. So Sanders says, friendly reminder that if you have auto submit disabled, you'll need to approve the trade from the trade notifications page. That's right. So let me show you what that looks like just so we can see it again. I'm going to disable auto submit. I'm going to go back to the webhook. I'm going to send an exit signal. The trade was created. And let's go to the inbox here. So you see that the first one with auto submit, see how it says trade auto approved? If I go back to the notifications and look at this trade, it hasn't been approved yet and it hasn't been submitted to the broker. So you'll see that there's this approve and reject button. So say I didn't want to take this trade, you know, and Sanders says, I do this during choppy market time so I can review the trade first. So you could have your strategy all set up and you could turn off auto submit and then wait till you get the alert. And then you can go look at the trade setup and kind of look at what the market is doing and decide if you want to take that trade or not. So say I didn't want to take that trade, I could click the reject button. And you'll see that the trade signal was rejected by myself. But say I change my mind. Actually, I do want to take the trade. I can click retry. And now it's back into that state that it was in before. And I can click approve. And now that order was sent to the broker. And if I go back to that TradersPost broker, you'll see that we've exited that position. And we made $14.55 testing these orders with Square. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is let's set up a futures strategy. So again, the first thing you want to do is create a webhook. So we'll call it futures webhook. And let's change it to futures and let's click save. And you'll notice I'm making a mistake. When I click save, we're going to get an error because Square is not a valid futures ticker. So let's change that to be NQ. All right, it let me save it now. So now we have this futures webhook. Let's create a new strategy associated to that futures webhook. We'll call this the futures strategy, and we'll associate it to the futures webhook. And we're going to take both sides, both bullish and bearish. Let's default it to NQ. And again, this is a future strategy. So instead of choosing stocks, let's choose futures. And instead of doing a percent of portfolio value, let's just hard code it so it'll buy a quantity of 1. And let's enter market and exit market. All right. And now that we have that strategy created, now we can create a subscription for that strategy in order to connect it to our broker. So click create a subscription, and let's connect it to the TradeStation futures broker. Now the futures markets are still open right now. They're open for another 28 minutes. So let's auto submit. Defaulted the settings of the strategy subscription to the settings that I defined in the strategy. We're taking both sides. It defaulted to NQ. It's associated to my TradeStation futures paper broker. The asset class is futures. It's hard coded to a quantity of 1. And we're entering entry market and exit market. And you see here, it's buying 1 contract of the current NQ contract. Now, if I were to change this to 2 and click save, you're going to notice that the quantity here is going to update. And again, what I showed before, we have the bullish and bearish example. That's because we have sides both chosen. So if I were to change this to bearish only, then the entry order is going to be a sell short order. If I change this to be bullish only, it's going to be a buy order. So let's do both. And let's change this back to a quantity of 1. And when you change sides to both, you get this little switcher here that allows you to preview the orders for both bullish and for bearish. So you can see what it would look like. Now, just to show you what this looks like, say you wanted to have a 10% take profit and a 2% stop loss. Click save, and now this preview order shows you what that looks like. So for a bearish example, it's going to sell short, and the take profit and the stop losses are buy to covers. And now if I switch to the bullish example, it'll be the reverse. So it's a buy, and this is just a regular sell to close. This is the take profit, and this is the stop loss. All right, so let's remove this, and I'm going to come back later. I'm going to show you, re-add it and show you what it looks like. So we'll click save, and now the example orders no longer have that take profit and stop loss. So we're going to enable the strategy subscription now. Everything looks good. So let's go back to our webhook, click view, and then click send request. And let's send a buy order for NQ. All right, the trade was auto submitted. Let's go up to our notifications. We'll see now that we had that buy for NQ. It was submitted to TradeStation. Let's just click view here. So you can see the API call that we made to TradeStation. We can click that to view it. So you can see that we made a API request to the orders endpoint. This was the data we sent, and this is what they responded with. So we did a market buy for NQ, and it gave us an order ID, and it basically said that that order was accepted successfully. So now if we go back to the TradeStation futures broker, you'll see now that we have an open position. Now, let's go back to the webhook and let's send another request. But actually, before I do that, I'm going to turn off auto submit. Go back to the webhook and let's do a send request and let's do a sell. Now, because I turned off auto submit, it's not going to submit it automatically to the broker. All right, so the trade is created. Let's go to our notifications over here, and you'll see that we have this new trade, and it wasn't submitted to the broker automatically like these were because we turned off auto submit. So this is kind of useful to just see, and the reason why I turned off auto submit, so as you can see what the trade is going to do. Because we have an open position, again, I'm going to go back, we have an open long position, and you'll see that we have this pending trade that hasn't been submitted to the broker. You can click back to view that trade, and we can see that it's calculated that because there's an open long position, we need to exit that position. So that's going to be a market sell. And then as soon as that exit order is filled, then it's going to immediately enter a short position. And this is the signal that triggered that trade. There's a little shortcut to click view log to get back to the page that shows after you send a webhook request. And then you can get back to the trade by clicking view trade. And again, we like I mentioned before, we try to put a debug button. This is basically to give you kind of an idea of what happens on the back end of TradersPost when we receive a signal. Is the first thing that we do is effectively plan that trade. And in order to plan that trade, we have to make a few API calls to the broker to find out if there are open orders for that ticker. Is there an open position? And then it calculates the exit order that we're going to send, and then calculates an entry order. So this is basically just the raw low-level debug data that the TradersPost staff will use, but it's also potentially useful for you to kind of get an idea of what TradersPost is doing underneath the hood. And the data that you see here in the debug is essentially the same data that's powering this user interface here. You can see that there were no open orders to cancel. The open position on NQ is going to be exited, and we're going to open a new position on NQ. So like I said before, if you wanted to reject this trade, you could click reject. And now that trade is rejected, but say I change my mind, I can click retry. And now I have the ability to approve that trade. And now it's going to send it to the broker. And you see now that there are 2 rows here under broker logs because we had to make 2 API calls, one to exit this position. And then as soon as that order fills, then it immediately sends the order to the broker to enter the new position. So this first API call is the exit. So it's a market sell. Go back to the trade. Then the second API call is a second sell to basically enter a new position. And you'll notice here that there's always this view trade button on the broker log screen. If that log was triggered by a trade, you'll have that convenient view trade button in order to get back to this screen here. All right, so now if I go back to the unified broker user interface, you'll see now that we have a short position open on NQ. So again, like I mentioned, if you wanted to manually close that position and you didn't want to wait for the strategy to send the exit signal, you could manually exit that position from within the TradersPost broker UI. Excuse me. You could also exit it manually from the broker directly. So if you had TD Ameritrade or Thinkorswim or the TradeStation app on your phone, you could close that position manually, and that position being closed would be reflected in TradersPost as well, because we are communicating to the API of the broker in real time. So we know live when there are open positions or there are not open positions. So because I closed that position manually, you'll see that this order right here was sent. We can click view order and we see the details of the order. If you go to connected brokers and click logs, so this was a futures under the TradeStation futures broker, we'll click logs and you can see a history of all the API calls that we've made. So this API call was the last one that we just made. And you can see the difference between the other API calls in the broker logs is that this one was created by a user. So if I go back to the logs and click this one, which was created by a trade, you'll see that it was created by the future strategy. And we have that view trade button. So this is useful to just kind of help you see like what made this API call to the broker. Was it me manually making the, was it me manually placing an order, or was it created by a automated trading strategy? So if you click future strategy, that'll take you to the trade that triggered that broker log. All right. Does that make sense so far? Does anybody have any questions? Again, feel free to ask any questions, or if you want me to cover anything specific, or any functionality or any questions about functionality, just throw it in the chat. Cool. All right, we'll move forward. So I don't think I've showed this screen yet. This is basically the dashboard of all the brokers that you have connected to TradersPost so far. It's kind of cool. You can actually have multiple TradersPost paper brokers. So if you click Connect Broker and click TradersPost, now you have a second paper TradersPost account. We can associate it with that TradeStation margin account so that it uses that TradeStation connection in order to get live market data. And now we have this separate paper broker account that we can place orders in. And because it's using TradeStation for the market data source, you can see it updating in real time. All right, so we'll close that position. And I'm just going to delete this paper broker. All right, so the last thing that we'll show today before we close up shop is we'll cover the options functionality. So what we're going to do is, again, everything starts with a webhook. So create a new webhook. We'll call it options webhook. And we want it to be the options asset class. And we'll use Square as the ticker. We'll save. Now we'll create a strategy. We'll call it option strategy. And we want to associate it to that options webhook that we just created. We're going to take both sides. And we want the asset class to be options, not stocks or futures. So now these settings come into play because we've chosen an asset class of options. And when we create a subscription to this strategy, it'll give you a little more information about what these settings do. But basically, we're going to do an option type of both, which means that we're going to buy calls when bullish, and we're going to buy puts when bearish. All right, and let's do plus 3 months. This is basically saying all of these settings are basically filtering the option chain data to whittle down the option chain to find a contract that fits your criteria. So we'll consider 12 strikes, 6 in the money, 6 out of the money, and we'll choose the second strike away from at the money. And let's just hard code this to a quantity of 1 and entry market and exit market. All right, so we have this strategy created. Now, because the options markets are closed right now, when we create a subscription, we're going to connect it to this paper broker so that we can actually see it get submitted to the broker, because the TradersPost paper broker will allow you to submit orders even when the market is closed. All right, so now we have this example order here. It shows you the contract that's selected. Let's check auto submit. We check Square, and let's change some of these settings here, right here. let's do 12 months. And now watch how the contract that gets selected changes when I click save. See how it's now selecting a contract that's 12 months out. Or say we want to do 4 strikes away. So now it's selected 92.50. All right, so let's go back to 3 months out and we'll do 2 strikes away. And let's enable the strategy subscription. Everything looks good. All my settings look good. Example looks good. Let's just take a look at the bearish example. So because we're getting a bearish signal and we have both selected here, when we get a bearish signal, it's going to buy to open a put. And then when we get a bullish signal, it's going to sell to close that put. You can see that this is a bearish order and closing that put would be a bullish order. Because when you buy a put, the value of the put goes up when the price of the underlying goes down. So you can make money on the put even when the market is going down. So buying long puts is a bearish position. All right, so we have this strategy subscription created. Let's go ahead and send a signal now to the options webhook. And let's see what we get. All right, so because the market is closed, so actually, even though it's the TradersPost paper broker, because it's a market order, it won't submit it to the broker until the market opens tomorrow morning. So that's kind of the extent of what I can show you while the market is closed. Let's just unqueue this and we'll reject it. But what I can show you really quick is the user interface for the option chain. So if you go find a ticker, so let's just go look at Tesla, there's an option chain button here. And this basically allows you to manually view the option chain just like you can in Thinkorswim or any other brokerage user interface. We can change the number of strikes to consider. So this will basically give us 7 strikes on each side of at the money. You can do 20. So you can see how it shows you more and more. If we only wanted to do 6, that would give us 3. And the default is 12. All right, and you can manually place orders. So now we have an open position on the 880 call May 6th contract. All right, I think that is pretty much everything that I planned on showing you all today. If anyone has any questions or wants me to cover anything else, we'll give it another minute. Just throw the question in the chat. If not, I think we'll close up shop today and that'll be it for today. Awesome. Thanks, Sander. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone, for attending. We do these webinars once a month. They're consistently on the first Tuesday of every month. So if you have any questions along the way, or you have any ideas or feature ideas or anything you want to talk about in the next webinar, feel free to put it in the Discord chat or shoot me an email at support@traderspost.io, and we'll make sure that we get those questions and topics covered in the next webinar. Awesome. Thanks, Banu. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Sander. Thanks, everyone, for joining. See you next time.